What's up, y'all? Y'all are listening to Living Corporate's flagship podcast. If you didn't know, Living Corporate helps organizations build employee engagement and market trust through data analytics and data transformation, our e-learning platform, and brand marketing storytelling. We're so excited for you to be here today. The conversation you're about to hear is going to connect the dots between employee experience and go-to-market effectiveness. If you're not ready, get ready. Here we go. Mark Crowley, what's going on, man? How you doing? Man,
I'm great.
Hey,
how are
thanks,
you?
thanks for being here.
Thanks
you know,
for
it's
having me
interesting. We followed each other just through socials, but we write and create similar content around the world of work. I think I saw you on Good Pods because I get the little all-time ranking notifications. I get the monthly notification rankings, and I think I saw you there first. But before that, though, we were already following each other. Talk to me about your work, your journey. I mean, I'm not calling you old, okay? I'm calling you seasoned. You've been doing your thing for some decades now in terms of leadership, but like, what spurred you into like the books that you've written, the talks that you've given, the consulting and leadership development work that you do, the organizational development work that you do? What spurred all of that on?
Well, thanks for the seasoned. I still feel like a young man here. And I think that has to do with the fact that I'm really inspired by the work that I'm doing, and I'm not going to give up until my influence is clear. But the big picture is that I spent almost 25 years in financial services and worked my way up to two very senior level, national level positions at one of the largest financial institutions, where I demonstrated that an entirely different model of managing people was a much more sustainable and much more productive approach. And so I ended up leaving that and decided that I was going to write a book. But in the process of writing the book, I had some guidance from a friend that said that my approach was so uncommon relative to like the dog eat dog world that we were coming from, that I needed to explain why what I was doing worked better. And so I ended up spending over a year looking for evidence to find basically that people are miserable at work. Companies are suffering massive turnover routinely, and they just build it into their business model, and they hire recruiters and trainers, and they just think that this is normal to, hire, train, lose, repeat. Like, this is insane. And not only that, but most people aren't really all that committed to the work that they're doing. They're just sort of punching the clock in and out. And I'm thinking, okay, so we're wasting everybody's time here, right? I mean, in the big picture, right? Companies, you're wasting revenue, you're wasting expenses, you're wasting time, and people, this is the only life that they have, unless, you believe in reincarnation. We'll talk about that some other time. But the point is that if this is the only life we have to live, people want much more fulfillment. They want much more meaning. They want to go to a job that gives them a sense of purpose and, that feels good going to. But in the process of writing my book, I realized that the effect that I was having on people was literally in their hearts. Like, I was caring for them and supporting them and making them feel safe and appreciated and teaching them and growing them and promoting them. That people were beating a path to work for me because it felt so good to work for somebody who would do all that for you. Meanwhile, I was getting great productivity. And so I looked at that, and the same friend said, tell me what you think was going on inside of people that made them scale mountains for you. And when I realized that, I truly believed that I was affecting people so deeply that that's what was going on. And I told my wife, I said, I've wasted a year of my life putting this together, because if I go out there and tell anybody that the heart has something to do with leadership, they're going to think I'm a religious, not a spiritualist, somebody who doesn't get business, all which, by the way, absolutely happened. And she says, but didn't you prove it in your own experience? And I said, well, yeah. And so she said, well, why don't you go out and look for some evidence? So the principal evidence that I found is I went to a world-class cardio surgeon, heart surgeon, and basically said, is there any, like, am I out of my mind here? Like, is it just telling me that there's no science to support this and I'll go away? And she said, nope, you're figuring out something we're just figuring out in medicine. She goes, when I went to medical school and we were working on cadavers for the first time and we're working on hearts, none of the medical students wanted to touch it, because they felt like we're dealing with, like, souls of people. We're dealing with something really special inside of people. And the doctor said, it's just a car part. Treat it like a carburetor, like you're going in there and you're fixing a muffler. And she said, I started to talk to people when I became a cardiologist. And I said, just tell me about yourself. And she said, the people that were coming in with serious heart issues were in bad marriages, horrible, stressful jobs, had serious financial problems, had alcohol or, some sort of substance abuse problem. She goes, their biography was driving their biology. And if it's a carburetor, that ain't going to happen. So she said, I think you're on to something. And she introduced me to an organization that's been researching the intelligence of the heart for the last now 30 years. And basically what they've shown, Zach, is that the heart and the mind are in constant communication, with the heart actually sending more communication to the brain than the other way around. We instinctively think that we are rational, but we're not. Most of our decisions are based on the feelings that we have every day. What's going on? Like, for example, I'll be funny. You're listening to this and you're like, this guy's crazy. What I need to do is to go, we have a flood in the house. I got to get out of here, right? I'm sorry, we can't finish this podcast. So that happened in here. That happened in your body first. The sensation that this guy's not right and we don't need to be spending any time here. So the mind goes, what are we going to do about this? So it goes, how about a flood, right? This is the way it works. So just to sort of punctuate this, if we're not rational beings after all, and that our heart and our mind are working together, then we should be thinking of ways to treat people in a way that gives them the positive feelings they need in order to optimally perform. And that's really my thesis, is that everything we've always believed about pay people as little as possible, squeeze as much out of them as possible, manage them with fear and intimidation, that's going to get us greater productivity. All wrong. Every bit of it is wrong, because it's counter to what's going on inside.
What I find incredible about that, first of all, so much of it, the whole thing what you said was incredible, but I think like the through line that I'm taking away from that is, just doing right by people is good business, right?
I mean, that is it. Except the funny thing is that we don't get that. Like that's a message. It's like it's it becomes garbled. So you say that to a CEO, and it's like, hey, if you just take care of your business, your people, the business is going to thrive. And they hear I'm like, you can't get through to them, because we have this tradition of treating people so indifferently, like fungible, if you don't do a good job here, Zach, we got somebody out there waiting for your job. And so people are just marinating in fear all day long, which is counter. Like, we know that human beings actually are here to thrive on positive emotions. So if you start off by going, hey man, if you want to keep your job, you better do better than what you're doing. And I'm watching you.
Yeah.
Like, immediately you're in fear. It's just, right? It just completely counter to. So if I have a concern about your performance and I just say, hey, Zach, I'm a little bit concerned. I'm not seeing the level of productivity. You're not really meeting your goals. What can we do? What do I need to do to help you? Is there something going on that's interfering? Something that I can help you navigate? That feels a lot better you and I together trying to solve this, right? So you're like, hey, he's
Yeah.
not threatening me. My job's not at risk.
Yep.
He's trying to help me. He's offering coaching, right? I mean, if you're doing it deliberately, that's a different thing. At some point, I'm going to have to deal with it. But the first approach we always think is write the guy up. Right? Immediately, we're going to go, let's punish the crap out of him and see if that works. And what it generally does is it makes people bitter, it puts them into fear. And a lot of times they'll end up just leaving. And then the manager goes, well, it was a bad apple anyway. And, he needed to go. And like, no, did you check to see that, that his kid's not struggling at school, or he's having a little bit difficulty with his marriage, or he's dealing with an elderly parent? Like, is there something going on that may be interfering with this? There's all sorts of studies that show that people that underperform will soon recover and perform well. But we just get rid of them, put him on 30 days notice, treat him like crap until he leaves. This is our mentality. And it's so counter.
Even like in the most pessimistic of metaphors, right? So, work, the world of work is transactional. We're extracting labor from a workforce to then to produce some output that we're then selling to the market. But it's silly to think that your behavior and the culture that you create is not going to have a consequence to your culture. Like that culture doesn't bleed out or have some type of impact to even what your customers are going to experience, right? So you think about all the studies done around, even just with livestock, right? There's studies showing that livestock that is in lower stress environments tastes better, right? There's ways that for people who love eating meat, there's ways to process and handle and kill animals that has less adrenaline going through their body and their blood, and it makes the meat taste different, right? There's all these studies about, again, just from a food perspective, is hey man, stressed out animals, the meat tastes worse. And again, even if I'm being as pessimistic as possible, on this idea of just we're just in this factory of work and we're looking to just churn people through. It's even if that is your most crass viewpoint, hey, treating people and having a culture of fear, it's just not going to have the best outcome, not only for your employees, but the market that you're trying to serve. I'm thinking about, Mark, my time in consulting, but just corporate America in general. So much of it is fear driven. It's punishment driven. They're the carrots, I feel have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller, to the point where it's hey, I just got to make sure I'm doing my job, like you said, or else. I'm curious. Everything you're sharing, 1,000% agree. This idea of the heart talking to the brain, and the feelings involved in just employee experience, really dynamic. I'm curious, have you done any consideration or work, or rather, what in your perspective does lived experience play into that, right? So as an example, I am 35-year-old Black male living in Houston. I have family that lives in Minnesota. I shared circles with George Floyd before he was murdered. I'm pulled over by police. I have my own experiences out in the world. I also have my own micro and macro aggressions that I deal with at work. When we talk about leadership and leading from the heart, what role does being mindful of employees from different backgrounds and circumstances come into that? Is that explicit in your methodology? Is it more just implicit? Where does that fall into play?
Well, I want to just I'm going to answer your question. I want to give you something else that you might find fascinating. Human beings are sentient. We feel, right? So are cattle. And so when you say that if you take the fear out of them, that it tastes better, it's because we're not taking on that energy. We're not, that doesn't just disappear when we slaughter cattle, right? It goes into the food we eat. So we might want to think about how we treat the animals and frankly everything that we eat, because we're putting pesticides on and we're thinking that's a good thing, but not necessarily, right? So there's a study that was done about, 20 years ago, 15 years ago in Great Britain. And what they showed, and I'm going to make up the number, I don't remember what it is, but what I'll tell you is that they proved that simply naming cows increased milk production by 5 or 6%, simply by, and this just fits completely into my whole thesis, right? Because if you've got a tag with a number and you're just milking these things like a machine, this is the way we think about work, right? So how are you going to respond? If you're a sentient being and you're just being milked and you're just being exploited, there's one way, it's like, I'm going to give you what I got, but I'm not giving you any more. But then you call Nellie or Bessie or, and you express some love. That's how they feel it. That energy goes into the cow, and the cow says, you know what? I'm going to produce a little bit more. Or you just create an environment inside of them where that happens naturally. I don't know what the reason is, but what I do know, it's the love, it's the care, right? So one of the most essential parts of managing a successful team owes to a professor at Harvard Business School, Amy Edmondson, and she's written all about psychological safety. So psychological safety basically says that you can be who you are and be respected, not just by your manager, but by everybody around you, right? You can speak your mind as long as you're not completely disrespectful, right? We're not going one way or the other. And that there's an honoring of diversity. In fact, massive studies have shown that the most diverse teams are the most successful. And the reason is because people coming from different perspectives have different points of view. More points of view brings more ideas leads to more creativity, better outcomes, all of those kinds of things. So, I think, if you're going to be a leader today, if you're going to be a manager today, you have to love people. Right? I mean, simply have to love people. If you get a management job because you think it's a promotion and that this is a way for you to prove yourself and get more recognition for yourself and more pay for yourself and more career growth for yourself, all at the expense of other people, that is never going to work again. It's been the way we've done it forever. It can't work anymore. And if you can't create an environment where everyone feels safe, everyone feels welcome, everyone has a sense of belonging, then again, go do some individual contributor job, right? So if you have issues with people of different races or whatever, right? Different creeds, different sexuality, the world we live in is the world we're going to attract into our companies. And if you don't like that, if that doesn't work for you, then go do something else. You can't manage people, because the only way that what I'm talking about is going to work is that if you apply it to everyone. You can't be caring and supportive of the people that are like you and ignore the others, because everybody's going to see the duplicity of that and it's going to backfire on you. But it's also just patently wrong. So, yeah, I mean, I haven't lived your life experience and I can't even imagine what that life experience is. But we're in an era now where it's just simply unacceptable for managers to have bias at all towards the people that they're leading and managing.
And I appreciate that answer, and thank you for the context. I'm probably going to have to put a link in the show notes about the cows and that milk and stuff, because it's very fascinating. But linking
it's in my book. If you
book gonna be in the show notes.
The whole story is in my book.
And thank you. So here's the other piece I'm thinking about as you're talking through just treating everything with some degree of respect and thoughtfulness and care. It's the sustainable thing to do too, right? So, we're in this and I've been talking about this all year. Like, we're in this landscape now where layoffs have just become, to me, I'm part of the increasing operational norm. So we are um, we are looking to have higher and higher profits, and a lever to make sure that we do that is reducing. Excuse me. Thank you. Is reducing expenses.
Especially,
People are part of that expense. So we're going to go ahead and make some decisions. I think that, and we're even seeing now, like, some organizations are overdoing it when it comes to some of the reduction decisions they're making, and they're trying to figure out how they get some of that talent back. But I think when I think about just like the future, the present and the future of work, it's going to need to be people that are focused on retaining the talent they have, that they're treating folks right and respectfully, because eventually you're not going to just have a bunch of people clamoring to work at your organization. I mean, we're already kind of seeing it. There is a fight for talent. Now, and like, respectfully, there's a lot of C and D level talent out there, but the A and B level talent is not going to be clamoring to rush to your organization in the next 15, 20 years, clamoring to work for you, if they realize and they see that you don't really care about their people. And then to your other point around, just like you mentioned pesticides, it's like, man, like, we've just been, and this has really been since I do think it's a colonial structure, this really extractive type of philosophy, right? We extract from everything. We extract from the land, we extract from animals, we extract, like, our environment, we extract from people. And at a certain point, I think it's going to take a different type of leader, a different type of mindset for the workforce of the future. I think my question to you, as we talk about all of the work that you're doing in the book that you've written, right now, like, most of leadership is like old white guys. And so, like, how do you propose that we change? Like, there has to be some type of almost like revolution, right? Like, I mean, everyone's going to just sudden, like, almost like a renaissance or something of sorts, for people to adapt and adopt different ways of working, because I don't see how else it happens, Mark. I mean, what am I missing?
Not much. So, okay. So, I can't help that I'm an older white guy. What I can tell you is that I had a unique experience that I'm pretty convinced is the reason I'm here on the planet. Like, this is the work I was born to do. And I won't go into the evidence for that, but it's pretty compelling in my mind. And so when I wrote the book, you can't see it, but it's in the background here. The first time was in 2011, and it's called Lead from the Heart for a reason. I explained why. Like, I could have called it Killer Engagement and buried the whole heart thing. But the reason I didn't is because even today, 2011, 13 years later, I'm still the only one who's not using that as a metaphor. I'm saying it literally. Like, it's science. It's how we have two forms of intelligence, the heart and the mind. And you use the word mindset, and I'm thinking, well, it should also be a heart set, because if it's only what's going on up here, you're not getting the whole story, right? So when I came out with this message, I was met with tremendous resistance. People just dismissed me as, well, he has to be stupid. Like, nobody would bring in heart to leadership. We don't treat people well, because if we do, they're going to get soft around the middle. They're going to take advantage of you, and they're not going to drive performance. And the issue is that what they conflate is that caring about people is going to negate productivity, when what I proved is that it's just the opposite. that when you care about people, they reciprocate with greater performance than you could ever get them to do by putting them under their thumb. So I write articles for Fast Company. I have a podcast with an audience around the world. And these are people that are following me with the intention of helping to convince the rest of the world that this is the way we need to go. But when you have hundreds of years of oppressing people in the workplace, it ain't easy to get people to just go, oh, he's right, we should change. It just, and I would say I was naively thought that we would, because the science that I put in the book is just so remarkable. Like, whoever thought that the heart was anything more than a pump, right? But one thing about, and I'll speak about the layoffs in a second here. But one thing that I did believe early on was that the science was so compelling that when CEOs understood it, that they would go, hey, we need to change our culture. We need to start hiring more caring managers. We need to reinforce that this is part of our culture. Didn't happen. And what happened is the CEOs were like, I clawed my way to the top, stepping on a lot of toes. That's how I want people to get to the top. I don't want them managing any differently than I did. So where the change is coming from is that Gen Z, Gen Y, they're like, I'm not coming to work for you if you're going to create an environment like that. Now, unfortunately, companies leverage the fact that we all need jobs. We all need a living, right? So some people won't resist bad treatment because it's all they have. But you mentioned A talent, B talent. I don't like to necessarily classify it that way, but people that have options are going to take them if they aren't given opportunities to really be trained and taught well. Treated well is really what I mean to say. And as far as the, so basically what I'm saying is it's going to be forced bottom up, and that change is underway, or I would go do something else. The layoffs is interesting because that really just rattled me. What rattled me was when Google laid off 12,000 people in one day, right? And I look at that and I just think, boy, was that just the self-destruction of one of the most brilliant workplace cultures in history, right? And I think what it really came down to was that we are still so deferential to Wall Street that, if we're not hitting quarterly numbers, then, CEOs got to go. And so there's constant pressure from boards on management. And so management does what most humans do, is they buckle under pressure and they stop caring about people in the process of being deferential to shareholders. So that has to stop. Where that's going to stop is when we have a major market correction, and companies are going to go, we don't have the right people in place to help us rebound. Companies are going to fail in that situation because they treated people so badly. And people are like, hey, you expect me to help you row faster after how you've treated me? It's going to come back. I'm an absolute believer in karma. Everything has an equal and opposite reaction. And I just think you can't get away with that. The interesting thing is, and I don't know if you've seen this, but their layoffs have stopped. Companies... And so I think what they've begun to realize is that the reaction, like you pointed out, it's like, you let me go and you want me back? No. Like that's what Elon Musk has tried to get people to come back, and they didn't go back. So you keep doing this to people and you build a reputation of exploiting people and letting people go when you get into trouble, and then you expect them to help you when you're in trouble. It can't work both ways. So I think this is sometimes we need something really bad to happen. Like, I don't like it, but it may be instructional in terms of, hey, CEO, pull that stunt again and see the price you pay.
Interesting. And I hear you about like, hey, you did all this research, you put all the science there. It's obvious. I think the irony is that you came at something from a facts-driven perspective, a data-driven perspective, quantifiably proven by researchers and doctors and scientists. But the same way that you're sharing that you're leading from the heart, like one could argue those executives, they're also leading from emotion, but it's the emotion of wanting to retain power and control, right? So like we have this conversation all the time. It's so funny, man. Like in with the data analytics work that we do at LivingCorporate, there's data out there that shows, hey, if you diversify, and we've done this, right? Like with clients, hey, if you diversify your workforce in this way, or hey, if you don't seek to create some programming for these particular groups, you're going to have this type of attrition, which is going to create this type of loss financially. Hey, look, this group has a negative experience and they're servicing this product line in the market, and we believe that this could create negative customer experience. Those discussions, you would think they would be pretty cut and dry because it's the data, and I'm connecting it back to dollars. So we're showing you why you need to make this decision, why it's for the sustainability of your business. But I question if CEOs are always interested in sustaining their business, if that means that their power dynamic shifts, right? Like, I think if a company said, hey, we can be around here for the next 1,000 years, but we're going to have to do some power redistribution, versus, hey, we're going to be here for the next like 100 years and we can just continue to like be in control. Like, I wonder if you did a blind study, who would choose what, right? Because
I don't know that that's a power issue. I'm completely following you in terms of the instinctive need to protect power. I mean, if you just look at government and you look at what people do, the behavior is like, right? Anything to stay in power. Lord Acton, power absolutely corrupts. There's no question, right? But I think it's more of an issue of what's in front of me versus what's not in front of me. And, the average CEO tenure now is so brief, and there's so much money on the line for them that the equivalency of power is really financial gain. So they're going to do whatever it takes right now to move the needle, and they're not necessarily, and nor do they have any financial benefit to be going, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, you look at the demographics of this country, we're going to be much better off if we're diverse. They're going to go, I don't really care about what's going to happen 3 years from now because I'm not going to be here. Board's probably going to fire me or kick me out, and I'm going to get my package based on what I do today. So this is another reason why what I'm talking about, it's like Sisyphus, pushing the boulder up, and, every day it's like, did I move it at all? It just keeps falling backwards. But the change comes, it just doesn't come with speed. So you just have to be a broken record, ancient reference.
Season. I love it. It's called a callback, y'all, for those who've been listening, who tuning in. Listen, I appreciate that because you're right? Like, we're in this corporate culture where we're not looking at, and we've talked about this on LivingCorporate, and anywhere I go that is wild enough to have me as a guest, we're not looking at 36, 60-month roadmaps anymore. We're looking at like 12 to 18-month moonshots. So really fair call out, really fair point there that leaders may not even they're certainly not thinking about 1,000 years, and they're probably not thinking about 3, because they're trying to just get return right now, because they're not measured and held accountable by 36 months, Mark. They're measured and accountable every quarter to quarter.
I mean, boards would be smart to say, hey, we're going to pay you X million dollars to do this job. And if you want a little bit of a carrot, we're going to give you stock options that pay out in 5, 7, 10 years. And by the way, if you're dead, sorry, but those shares will go to your heirs. So whatever it is, this is extra income, right? But here's the threshold. the stock price has to be certain, X or Y or Z times what it is today, right? So if it's 5 years from now, if the stock is up by 50%, that's 10% a year, basically like that, you're going to get millions more, and it's going to go to you, and it's going to be this windfall that you don't have to do anything. You can be on the golf course for the next 5 years and you still get it. So, you have to create some deferred compensation for these people so that they have a vested interest, because these are self-serving. They're focused on themselves. You don't get to the top without being that way, right?
Element for
not
sure.
necessarily entirely, but I'm saying that there's a lot of self-interest. Yeah. You're working your ass off to get to that level. So the idea of leaving millions of dollars on the table because all you're doing is focusing on today, it's going to influence them to at least slow down and make their decisions to go, well, do I just trust that fate is going to take us there, or do I need to do some things today to ensure it? So at least it slows them down, and if they make a better decision 50% of the time, then that's a huge payoff for the company, as far as I'm concerned. Because, the other thing is that companies aren't lasting anywhere near as long as they do, right? I mean, seriously. You want to survive, you better be thinking long term, and
so
we're
smart.
paying
No,
them.
I agree. Look, Mark, this has been a fire conversation. I feel like we could probably go on another hour, but I want to give space for us to do a part 2 and 3, and maybe I slide over your spot. We could continue on, but before we let you go, where can people learn more about Mark Crowley? And by the way, we can see your book in the background. Where can we learn more about you, your work, and just what's happening in your space, man? Free space. Please go ahead.
I mean, the name of the book is Lead from the Heart. Mark C. Crowley, if you can see it in the background, that's the second edition, which just came out about 18 months ago. It's been taught in 11 universities. So it's interesting because while business was, oh, no, you don't, education was, hey, this guy sees the future and we're embracing it. And I found that that's really sustained me, to be honest with you. When you realize that business is fighting this, you go, well, you're defeating your own self-interest. But education is saying we need to prepare people for where things are going, so they're much more open-minded to it. So markccrowley.com is my website. I have the Lead from the Heart podcast, and the name of the book is Lead from the Heart. So if you just look up Lead from the Heart, most of the stuff will come up. markccrowley.com is
Mark,
the website. Everything
we appreciate
is there as
you.
well.
I'm going to call you friend of the show. Okay. I'm telling you already. Okay. Come back whenever. Let's make sure we keep talking, keep lines of communication open via those DMs, and we'll talk to you soon, brother. Thank you. Peace.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Zach. Best to you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.